Hello and welcome to Daily Debrief, brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Swastika, and let's begin with the impact of the Russian war on Ukraine and on oil prices. Now, oil prices have soared to the highest level since July 2008, after the US said it was discussing a potential ban on Russian supplies with other countries. Russia is the world's second top producer of crude oil. In recent days, the cost of gas in Europe and the UK has hit record levels as fears persist that Russian supplies could be reduced. The price of Brent crude soared to almost $140 a barrel. Now, we are joined by NewsClick's Prabir Purkayastha to tell us more about this. Prabir, if you could tell us the implications of this price rise.
See, the implications of this price rise is twofold.
Okay.
One is it's going to impact, of course, the people because there will be a general price rise. It's a consequence of this. It's going to, as you know, a lot of commodity pricing is also related to what is the price of the input, as well as the transport cost of bringing large amounts of goods, food, everything. So this is a general driver of inflation. Of course, is the oil and gas price. So that's what is one of the implications. But more than that, it has specific impacts on different parts of the world. In Europe, because that's where it is originating from, because this whole issue of putting various constraints, limiting the production of oil and gas from Russia, is because of the sanctions, the economic sanctions which has been put, and also the sanctions which European Union is threatening now to put on the production or the import of gas into European Union. So all of this are related at the moment to the Ukraine war in the way that you were talking about. And of course, this is what is contributing to the rise of oil prices. For consumers in India, for example, if the oil price doubles as it has over the last 6-8 months, what we are likely to see, of course, is petrol and other costs going up. But that's only one part of it. The other part of it is this oil and gas are also raw materials for a set of downstream products. For instance, fertilizers, various other products, but fertilizers specifically. So if that starts to go up, then all the plants, for example, in European Union, which depend on the supply of gas from either Russia or LNG supplies from elsewhere, if enough supplies are not available or if the price has gone up, in both cases, those plants are likely to shut down. So there is going to be a much bigger impact, not just on the price of oil as an input, not simply as inflation, but also in terms of stoppage of production of various things. So I think these are important issues. At the moment, it seems European Union is recharging its storage so that if there is a dislocation, which it's hoping will not be very long, it can ride it out through the storage it builds. And that's perhaps the reason why you see, though European Union is supposed to be sanctioning Russia, the amount of money it is the amount of money it is paying per day seems to be rising. As you can see from the Bruegel chart over here, it shows that from something like $300 million per day, the price has gone to $660 million per day that it is paying to Russia, European Union. It's not simply because they're drawing more gas, it's because the gas price is rising. And if you look at the gas price, it has risen in the European Union, again looking at the Bruegel charts, by about 4 times from, say, 3 or 4 months back. So this fourfold increase of the price of gas means that, of course, the amount of gas, even if it is less, and they are reducing supplies possibly from Russia, it still means the amount they have to pay to Russia is increasing. So these are all the elements that go into this. But the bigger issue really is what happens to the rest of the world, and are we in a position to face the consequences of the prices going up and for an absolute lack of supplies, shortage that we may get as a consequence of driving Russian gas out of the market.
In fact, talking about European Union, Prabir, how is Europe going to plug its energy needs when it comes to gas and LNG?
Well, that's an interesting issue because Russian gas has been supplying Europe. It's about 30%, 35% for the last 15, 20 years. So this is not a short-term issue. They had planned for Nord Stream 2, which now seems to be out of the reckoning, but they have Nord Stream 1, which is still the major supplier, and also the Yamal pipeline through Ukraine. All of this which used to supply Russian gas to European Union. Now, if they want to shift away from European gas, which is what the long-term plan seems to be, they have to go to LNG as a fuel. And if they shift to LNG, that means somebody is to supply them.
Yes.
Most of the LNG supplies are already booked in advance. And they really are the ones which go to Japan, Southeast Asia, to East Asia, and of course to China. They are the biggest consumers. Also India is also a consumer. So all of these have generally long-term contracts with the suppliers. The one that is free is of course United States. That may be able to produce LNG. The fracking gas, which was actually becoming uneconomical. The fracking gas, if the prices go up, then could be viable. And they could supply LNG to Europe. But this cannot be done in a day. It takes time to rejig all of this, the contracts, and then change over time. You can see, for instance, again the chart, which the Bruegel chart, which is here, you can see earlier that, say about a year back, Russia is to supply more gas, and the LNG quantum in the contract with the European Union was lower than the gas supplies from Russia. But now if you see already, they've started to drop the amount of Russian gas and switch to LNG. But even then, about 30% of their existing gas needs come from Russia, and dropping that means a huge, huge hit. It also has another hit that takes place if LNG is more expensive and it is short-term contracts. The price will go up with the price of crude, for instance. But also, it has an impact on the electricity prices because the European Union, in its wisdom, had decided that gas would be the transitional fuel. They'll cut down on nuclear energy, which Germany is doing. They'll cut down coal, which they have all derided as dirty fuel. That's why India and China were targeted as using dirty fuels and not good guys. Now what happens is, if you do all of that, that suddenly your gas as a transitional fuel is also not there because it was dependent, a lot of it was dependent on Russian gas. If you use LNG, LNG has all kinds of other issues, apart from the fact that it needs a certain amount of methane to be actually let out, because that's used to cool the liquefied natural gas. That's how it happens. Liquefied natural gas, that's why it's LNG, boils. And if it boils, then it cools the volume of the gas, and that's how the refrigeration, the liquefied natural gas, is maintained. So it's actually also meaning that a certain amount of free methane will be allowed. And methane, as you know, is a highly potent greenhouse gas. So effectively, you would also miss your other targets which you have set for yourself. So I really don't know how they are planning their energy transition, which is supposed to be essentially gas, and at the same time meet their greenhouse targets if they depend on LNG, as they seem to be now planning. So I think we are in for a very tough time. But let's face it, we are going to hit a huge impact of the LNG and oil price rise, essentially because it will add to inflation at a time when the consumption levels will also fall. So we're going to be hit by both ways, a depression in terms of consumption and an increase as an inflation in terms of prices. So I think economically we're looking at a rather dark global scenario.
Well, Prabir, thank you for those details. We will keep following up on the developing story that's out of Ukraine and Russia. Now let's move on to our next story. Our next story is on a related topic, the Iran nuclear deal. Reports say an agreement is close to being finalized after almost a year of discussions. The nuclear deal collapsed in 2018 after the then US President Donald Trump pulled his country out of it and imposed very harsh sanctions on Iran. After Joe Biden came to power, there have been discussions in Vienna between Iran and the other signatories, with the US participating indirectly. Meanwhile, some complications have emerged, with Russia placing some demands related to the war in Ukraine. We have with us Abdul to discuss more on this. Abdul, thank you for joining us. Abdul, if you could tell us, where are we in these discussions with the Iran nuclear deal by now?
Well, the talks are going on for last 1 year, almost a year. And this is the 8th round of negotiations, which are still going on. There have been 2 breaks in between. And since the beginning of this month, we were expecting, and the international community is expecting, that the deal will be announced any day. But it has been, the beginning of the February, the last one. So it has been more than a month since that anticipation that any day the deal will be announced. So you can say that we are in the final phases where the some nitty-gritty, some small technicalities are stopping the parties to finally come to a conclusion. Particularly since the beginning of this war in Ukraine, the US is in a hurry to kind of conclude the deal, because basic reason is Russia, which was one of the largest producers of oil and gas, has basically blocked out from the international trade because of the sanction and so on and so forth, and Iran is seen as an alternative, which can fill that vacuum, which can reduce the prices, which are going above $130 per barrel in different parts, and the gas prices are historically high in Europe and so on. So I think the West needs the deal. The US needs the deal at this moment, so it can be announced any moment.
Also, Russia has in fact made a demand at this point of time, and it's being said there could be some obstacles to the nuclear deal. What are the demands that Russia is making?
Well, the Iranians have responded that the war has nothing to do with the deal, in the context of what you are referring to. But it is a fact that Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov has categorically said that Russia needs certain guarantees from the US that its bilateral relationship between Iran will not be affected due to the sanctions, which are imposed since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. It means that Russia's deal, investments in Iran, Russia's bilateral trade agreements, Russia's weapon supply, Russia's banking transactions with Iran, and so on and so forth, all those things need to, Russia is saying that should be exempted. Then only the deal should go ahead. Since Russia is one of the parties of the deal, original deal, which was signed in 2015, this may create an issue. But the Iranians, as far as the Iranians are concerned, they are not seeing it as an obstacle. They are saying that this is one of the plot created by the US to delay the deal. They said that there is one excuse or another to basically pressurize Iranians to kind of compromise on certain things. And as they created the issue of Iranian reaching the threshold of nuclear bomb, and therefore we need the deal soon. And then Russia is creating pressure. All these things Iranians are saying from their side that this is basically a tactic used by US to basically get some kind of leverage from Iran so that the deal is signed sooner. So yeah, on factual ground, there is a demand put by Russia. Whether that is a fundamental thing which can hamper the deal or not, we do not know at this moment.
So we will actually keep following this story to see what really comes out of the signing of the deal and the agreement. Thank you for those details and joining us, Abdul. Meanwhile, the impact of the war is being felt in the Asia-Pacific region, with the US continuing its policy of encirclement of China in East Asia. Last week, a high-level delegation from the US visited Taiwan, while the Biden administration greenlit a massive defense contract that would expand Taiwan's missile deployment capacity and other military technology. We also saw that China was the central focus of the Quad meeting led by the US. Now, the joint statement released by the leaders of the 4 nations talks about their commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific and has agreed to hold an in-person meeting in Tokyo in the coming months to work on this commitment. The Quad comprises of the US, Australia, Japan, and India. Now, let's go over to Anish to talk more about this. Anish, NATO and Quad, could you connect the dots for us?
Well, the Quad meeting was kind of a rushed meeting that Biden had called. to get the other three countries in the region to join its supposed condemnation of Russia and also participate in the sanctions regime that the US has been trying to impose on Russia. Now, one of the key, weak links in that plan is obviously India, because India, because of its long-standing relationship with Russia, and also the fact that Russia is one of the biggest arms supplier for the Indian armed forces, it obviously puts India in a very difficult position to actually take a stand. And India's position right now is a very practical one, which is also something that a lot of other major powers have taken, like South Africa, China, Cuba, and so on. So the point is that they are calling for diplomacy, they're calling for peace, and they're calling for talks, unlike what the West or the NATO powers are trying to do, and which is also supported by countries like Japan and Australia, which is also, as we know, part of the Quad. So in that case, the talk, which I think barely went for 2 hours or maybe less, you had this whole thing with the Quad meeting turning into an anti-China meeting. So beginning from Ukraine, where it was very apparent that India's position on that matter will not be changing. The one way to get India's support in many ways, or to keep India within the sphere of influence, is obviously to go against China. So, and the end of it, we saw this whole commitment about Indo-Pacific, and the Indo-Pacific being the major thing. And the joint statement that was released, it was barely like 3 paragraphs. And it had Indo-Pacific mentioned like at least 4 or 5 times. And that was the key focus of it. Now, what is this whole thing about Indo-Pacific that they're more concerned about? It is Taiwan, but also China, especially China, this whole targeting of China that is happening. Trying to create a sort of, as you rightly pointed out, this encirclement of China in the name of Ukraine, which is a very curious thing to happen as well, because obviously China and Russia are not the same. It's very apparent because it has major trade relations with all its neighbors. It understands that very well, and it understands the key to any kind of dispute settlement is through talks. But one thing that always stands out is one is South China Sea. Obviously, that is the whole thing with free and open Indo-Pacific. But the other one is Taiwan, which has taken a very problematic direction, politically speaking, and especially considering the politics of the region as a whole.
Actually, you did mention Taiwan, which has now become a flashpoint between the US and China. Yeah. If you could tell us more about that.
In the case of the United States or Taiwan, the government in Taiwan especially, right now is that they are veering towards this secessionist position, which is to claim that Taiwan is somehow an independent country, and it always was an independent country or has an independent identity from China. But the fact remains that it is quite a Chinese province. It doesn't, its history is tied to China. And that has created tensions that the Tsai Ing-wen government is quite responsible for. United States is stoking that. Now, this is very similar to what they did in Ukraine for the past 7 years. And this stoking of fears on, in Taiwan, but also in the region, is quite a manner of, provocation on the part of not just US, but also Taiwan. So you have tensions coming up. China has given out statements, but you do not have any kind of major provocations coming from their side. But on the other hand, the US is now amping up now they recently passed about $500 million of contract for missile deployment or expanding the missile deployment capacity in Taiwan, which is a huge thing that Biden administration has done so far. Obviously, Trump began this whole thing with putting in more money for arms contracts, but now this is being continued, and this only raises tensions, doesn't really lead to any kind of diplomacy, doesn't lead to any kind of solution. And this is what we need to understand. Like, US is trying to exploit the situation in Ukraine for its own geopolitical interest in Indo-Pacific.
Thank you, Anish, for joining us with those details. Well, that's all we have on Daily Debrief today. Do keep following People's Dispatch and come back and join us tomorrow. Thank you.